Hey folks, how y'all doing? Today we're going to continue practicing with SQLite. We're going to run a bunch of queries, but we're going to also add a couple little twists. And that's a new query looking at the null statement. That's NULL. Essentially, we're going to select fields that are just blank, so we can maybe cut them out of our data if we wanted to. And like we added the count to the select line, we're going to also add sum and averages to the select line. So we're going to do a little bit of math, and this math, it's going to be pretty straightforward, and it's going to mirror what we did in Excel. Remember, we sum fields in Excel. So I posted the file nc_employees, drag that to a folder and make a copy of it, and then open it up to check it out. And I'll do the same right here. It's a CSV file, and we've looked at it before in Excel, and the data has around 209,000 records, and it's information on all current and former employees for the state of North Carolina. And you'll see it starts with the personnel area in column A, and that's essentially the department name. Then the employee name, appointment type, whether he or she is full-time permanent, full-time, etc. His or her age, the original hire date, current position title, current job title, last public information action. So in this case, the person was let go or separated, and this person is a new hire. Moving on, we have the last salary increase action, the last salary change amount, so how much of a raise he or she received, current salary, and position county. You would need a record layout to turn these numbers into a county name. For instance, 92, I know from working with this data, is Wake County. And as we have to make sure we do every time to a CSV file before we import it into SQLite, let's change the numbers as numbers. So let's save last salary change amount, right? That's a dollar amount. And current salary, that's also a dollar amount. Let's save them as numbers. So I'm going to go up to General, highlight the two columns, go to General, click Number, and then I'm going to back up my two zeros. And if you remember, we also saw this field over here, age. I'm going to save that as a number. Then I'm going to get rid of the two zeros. And I'm going to scroll through my data just to make sure everything else is a text. Original hire date has numbers in it, but really we can treat that like a text field. And position county has numbers in it, but really these numbers represent a county name, which names, of course, are text. So I'm going to save this file and close it out. And I'm going to open up DB Browser for SQLite and walk through the steps. In other words, create a new database, create a new table, and then eventually import my data. Okay, let's open up DB Browser for SQLite. Click OK if you get this message, or exit out, and new database. Navigate to where you want it, and I'm going to call it NC Employees. Click Save, and my table name is also NC Employees. There we go. Now we have to add fields, and this can get a little tricky because we have so many fields, but if you write down the headers beforehand, or maybe if you do a split screen with your CSV file, or heck, you can even take a picture with your phone of the column headers. So let's add the headers, and we'll go one by one. The first one is personnel area, and that's an integer, and now we're going to change it to a text. Next one was employee name, change that to a text. Then it was appointment type. Now it's full-time, part-time, etc. Change that to a text. And then it was age, integer, so I'm going to keep that. Then original hire date, text. Add another field, and it was current position title, text, and then current job title, text. Then the next one was last public information action, last pub info action, text. Add a new field. That was last salary increase action. And that's the text. We're almost there, a couple more. Then we have a last salary change amount. Whoops. And that's an integer because that's essentially his or her raise. Add another field, current salary. I think it's just CURR. No, actually it's CURRENT on this one. Current salary. Add another field. And position county. And that's a text. I'm going to go through these just to make sure I have them all. So position county. Oops, I want to change that to a text by accident. There we go. So position county, current salary, last salary change amount, last salary increase action. Looks good so far. Then last public info action, current job title, current position title, right there, original hire date, age, appointment type, employee name, and personnel area. And the three integers that I want are age, last salary change amount, and current salary. Now I'm not going to fill in any of this, and the reason why is because I'm not too familiar with the data, and I'm not sure which ones are nulls or which ones may be blank, so I don't want to take any chances and screw anything up with my information. So I'm going to scroll down and click OK. And if we browse data, you'll see our shell. Now let's try importing the CSV. So File, Import, Table from CSV, NC Employees. Click OK. Looks good so far. Click OK. Click Yes. Sometimes if you say a file is not null and it is null, and you just haven't looked at the data that closely, then that can screw up your import and you have to redo all the steps that we just did. So I was overly cautious and I just left everything blank. Now you can see it's taken a few seconds to import. That's because it's so big, 200,000 records. And once it's done and we get the green light, then we can start running some queries. Okay, 90%, 96, import complete, perfect. Let's browse our data just to check it out. See these nulls? They could have screwed up our import if we would have selected a different option. But here's our data, and you can see down here on the lower left, 209,000 records, and we finish with position county. Okay? Perfect. Now, if I were to look at the record layout for this data that the state would have given me when it sent me the data, it would say that the current position title, this field right here, if it says null, that means that he or she is now a former employee and is no longer current. And you can see that by also scrolling over here to the last public information action, and you can see that they're separated, right? And these are separated. So, as a reporter, they may not be of interest for a story that I'm working on if I just want to look at salary for current employees. And there's a query that we can write that would select all records that either all are null, N-U-L-L, or are not null. So go to Execute SQL and create a new tab. Now first I'm going to write the one where it selects all that are null, and then that's just for your information. Then I'm going to backspace it up and say select all that are not null, and we'll save that one. So the query for that are select all, like we learned the first day with dealing with SQL, from our table name, NC employees. Right? The where line gets a little bit different, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Where, I'm going to browse back to my data, current position title. That's the field that I'm interested in. Where current position title, you can see that highlights. Now to show you first the ones that are null, just put current position title is N-U-L-L. So this says select all records from my table called NC employees where the field name current position title is null. Now watch when you run that. You see this? Our results. First of all, we get 124,000 records. So that means there's 124,000 former employees in this data. And all this field are null. And you can just look on the right hand side and see they're all separated. So that's a null query, but for our purposes we're going to change it up a little bit, and we're just going to add not in the middle. So select all from NC employees where current position title is not null. That's what we want to run, and we want to save that so we can run additional queries off of that view. Does that make sense? So I'm going to run it, and you can see my data changed, and I now have 85,000 rows. So there's around 85 current employees of the state of North Carolina, and current position title right here, the records are all filled out. So these are all current employees of the state. And that is the adding a null to your where line, where field is null if you want blank records, or where the field is not null if you want the records that are filled in. So let's save this and save it as current CURR, since that's how we've been writing it in the field headers, current NC employees. There we go, successfully saved. Now if you go to browse data, and you can check it out by there it is. It's under your drop down for browse data. Okay, so this is the data that we're going to be working with for the rest of the class. We're not going to deal with our NC employees. We just want the current NC employees. And rather than writing that where line throughout all the rest of our queries, now we have it sort of separated and in a box by itself. Now we can just query that view, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, so let's do a little practice and run a query that answers this question. How many employees are employed by each different personnel area or each different department? So how many people work for the state treasurer? How many people work for the Natural and Cultural Resources Department or Health and Human Services? So count how many people work at each department. Run a query like that. And feel free to hit pause on the video and run it yourself. But if you're stuck or a little hesitant, you'd have to include a specific word in your select line. And then, of course, when you have a field in your select line, you're going to also need it in your group by line. So I'm going to execute a query, and I'm only concerned about the current employees, mind you. So I'm going to create a new query tab, and here's how you do it. select personnel area. That's the field we want. Then what do we want to do 90% of the times when we select a specific field? We want to count the records. And we want to rename it using the word as, something simple like number records. So I'm selecting the personnel area, I'm counting how many records for each personnel area, and I'm renaming that field called number of records. Now I don't want to do from NC employees because I'm only interested in current employees. So I'm going to do our view that we just created, current NC employees. There we go. Whatever's in your select line has to be in your group by line. Personnel area. And we're journalists or in communications field, so we want to order it typically from top down. So order by 2, our second column, descending. So there's my query. Select personnel area, count the records, and rename that field from our view called current North Carolina employees. Group by personnel area and order it by 2, descending. Let's run that. See what we get. There we go. So what this says is that the Department of Public Safety has the most current employees in the state, 32,500. Health and Human Services employs the second most people at nearly 16,000. Then the Department of Transportation down to 10,200, Judicial Branch 6,900, etc. Before we save this, let's tweak the query a little bit, okay? And let's add in some salary information. Now remember in Excel we ran the pivot tables where we sort of created something like this by dropping personnel area into rows and a personnel area then into values and counted the values. So this is essentially a pivot table. And also in pivot tables we can sum and average salaries. Well, we can do that in SQL as well. So I'm going to go back to my browse data, and if I wanted to do the average salary for each department, of course I'd want this field, current salary, right? So the way to do that, you can put it before your count or after your count. I would put it before the count and just always end the select line with count. So before the count, you want to type in the word average, or AVG actually, then a shift 9 and the field name. In this case it's current, all spelled out, salary. So we have personnel area, comma, AVG, shift 9, current salaries, open parentheses, current salary. And then once we create a new field, which we're doing, we're creating a field for the average salary, we have to rename it. And just like we renamed the count field with the word as right here, we want to do the same thing with this field as well. So as, now I'm going to call it average underscore salary. So our select line says select the personnel area or the department name, average the current salary, rename it as average salary, and then count the number of records and rename that as number of records. Now the reason I don't put average or count in my group by line is because they're not actually the fields in our original data. So group by only gets the fields in your select line that are in your original data. Does that make sense? So let's run this and see what we get. There we go. Now we have the average salary, and you can see I'm now ordering it by the second line over, which is now the average salary and not the number of records. So in this case, you could write a sentence that the State Budget and Management Office for North Carolina has the highest employee salary, average employee salary at around $88,400 right here. Information and Technology Office has the second highest salary, just behind them at $88,436. So very, very close, but just behind them. Or 84,000, I should say, and then down the row. So that's just a little tweak, and here's the tweak right here. Average current salary, quote or parentheses, unparentheses, then rename it to any name you want. Makes sense to me if you just say average salary. Okay, so let's save this. And let's call it current, because these are current employees. NC employees underscore AVG salary. So current North Carolina employees, average salary. Click OK and click OK. Now we can also write a sum query in our select line, and I bet you can guess at how we do it, but let's give it a whirl and let's essentially see what department, so what personnel area, has the highest payroll, because that's when you sum up all the salaries, that's essentially the highest payroll. So I'm going to create a new SQL tab and start writing my query. So select, what do you want? What field do we want? Personnel area, comma. And we're not going to average the current salaries this time, but we want to sum. So SUM, shift 9 for open parentheses, write out current salary. And once you add or sum or average a field or count a field, you have to rename it. So we're going to rename that one as total salary, makes sense. Or you can rename it as payroll or something of that sort. Comma, because that's all one field. Then we're going to count it. We're going to see how many employees also are in each personnel area. I'm going to rename that one as number of records. From, now we're not interested in all North Carolina employees, we're just interested in current North Carolina employees, so we're going to still query just the view that we initially created with the null statement. So current NC employees, and whatever field from our original data is listed in our select line, we need it in our group by line. So personnel area. And we're going to order it by 2 descending again. So we want to see which ones has the highest payroll up top. So quick review, select personnel area and sum the current salary and rename that current salary as total salary, and also count everyone in each personnel area. That's in our select line. From line is from our view current North Carolina employees, group by personnel area, order by 2, in this case total salary, descending. Let's try running that. And there you go. So the Department of Public Safety, which oddly enough had the most employees, remember that, also has the highest payroll. And it would be great if I could put commas in here, but I can't, so it looks like it's 965 million maybe. So that's for all their employees and all their benefits in a single year. Not bad, huh? So I'm going to click Save on this one. File, Save View As, and we'll label this Current NC Employees Total, TOT, Salary. Click OK. So doing math in SQL is not that bad, right? As long as you know the code, the computer program does all the work for you. Now we can also write a query that sums and averages everyone who's a current employee. In other words, don't select a personnel area or a department. Don't select the job title, don't select anything, just take all our data, all now 85,000 records for the current employees, and find the total amount paid to these guys, also the average paid to them. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new tab. And again, we're going to select records, right? We're not updating our table. So we're going to select. And in this case, we don't want a field, so we don't want personnel area. And we don't want to even select all our records. We don't want any field that's in the original data. All we want to do is find out how much total everyone gets paid, add up all the salary amounts, and then find an average of all their salary amounts. So just do that. Sum current salary, I'm going to lowercase it. Sum current salary, rename it as total salary, comma, also average current salary, and rename that as average salary. So you can see here, but I'm not selecting any field or any existing field in my data. All I'm telling SQL to do is add up the current salary field and rename it to total salary, and then add up or average the current salary field and rename that to average salary. All right? And I still need to tell SQL where to grab this information from. So it's from current NC employees, which was the first field that we created. Now, that should be it, because we don't need a where line, because we're not filtering the data. And we don't need a group by line, because we're not selecting any field that was originally in our data. All we're doing is we're doing math to it. We're sort of manipulating the field, so nothing would be in our group by line. So let's run that. And there we go. The first number is going to be monstrous. And without commas, it's hard to read, but there's 3. There's 3. So it looks like total payroll for the state of North Carolina is around $348 million. And the average salary for all state employees, these are part-time, full-time, seasonal if it has any seasonal. So the average salary for all 85,000 employees, $40,900. And you see how fast SQL did that? It's an amazingly fast program. So I'm going to save this one as current NC employees total average salary. And again, if you need to save these and ever look back at them to see what they say and what kind of query you wrote, you have them saved in your file. Now let's use our SQL math skills and throw in some of the older stuff that we learned in the past couple classes. So I'm going to look at browse data and say, for instance, I wanted to find everyone whose current job title was a registered nurse. So let's see if there are any. Okay. So say I wanted to grab everyone who's a registered nurse who was hired, and let's just say sometime in 2017. And you can see this is the original hire date, 2012 right here, registered nurse. So here's the question. Write a query that would find the average salary for everyone whose job title includes a current registered nurse, or a registered nurse, and who was hired in 2012, in that year. So what's the average salary of all current North Carolina employees whose job title is sort of like registered nurse and who was hired in 2017? Could you all do that? You'll want to hit pause and try it yourself. Then once you give it a whirl, turn the video back on and I'll walk you through the steps. So find the average salary for all current North Carolina people who have a job title like registered nurse and who were hired 2017. I'm going to create a new tab and I'm going to select average, so what we're just learning, current salary, and I'm going to rename that as average salary. So I'm selecting just the average current salary and renaming that. I'm only interested in current North Carolina employees, so I'm going to still check out just the first query that we wrote, or the first view that we wrote, current NC employees. This is where it gets a little tricky. There's two different things that I needed here in my where line. I needed people whose job title was like registered nurse and who were hired in 2017. So let's start with the first one, where current job title right there, like registered nurse. That should scream out wildcard, right? Like, single quote, %, and then registered nurse. And remember, this is case sensitive, so we're going to have to double check our cases, but I think it was capital R, registered, and I think it was capital N. So I'm going to double check that before I run anything. Yep, capital R, capital N. And the reason I did the wildcard was just in case that registered nurse had anything else added to it. It doesn't look like it did, but just in case it didn't say like registered nurse part-time or registered nurse full-time, etc., I want to grab them all. So I'm going to be safe and add just the wildcard. So registered nurse, NURSE, and single quotes. And you need the hire date of 2017. Now how do you do this? Because we didn't break out the years, right? Well, we can use a wildcard again. So first we have to say and, then the field we want. Original hire date, ORIG _ hire _ date. Then a single quote. And like most wildcards, we're going to use the %, 2017. This is where it gets a little bit different. We don't want a % at the end. We just want a quote. And the reason we don't want a % at the end is because we don't want we want just the year to be 2017. In other words, we don't want any characters after 2017, because you never know. It might be like February 1, 7 something. 2017, in other words, might be in the original, somewhere in the middle of our hire year. And this says, give me a wild card. I have to add the word like. Like, some characters could be before 2017, but it's going to end in 2017. And that tells me just the year is 2017. So let's review my where line. Where current job title, like, single quote, %, registered nurse, and hopefully I spelled that right, and original hire date, like, single quote, %, 2017, and just 1% sign on that sign. REGISTERED. Let's try running that. There we go. $60,000 is the average salary. So I'm going to save this, but I'm also going to fact check my where line just to make sure. I'm going to save this as current NC employees average nurse 2017. Current NC employees, average nurse 2017. Now how could I possibly fact check that? I could take my where line and copy it. Actually, I'll take my where and my from line and copy it. Copy, create a new tab, say select all, and then paste in my other two. So I'm pasting in my from and I'm pasting in my where, and what this should return are all records where the job title is like registered nurse and the hire date was 2017. If it returns anything different from that, then that's a huge red flag. I'd go back and I'd see what I did wrong. But let's try it. Okay, here are my records. Looks like I have 68 of them down here. First of all, let's check out the hire date. 2/6/2017. So February 6, 2017. Looks like July 10th, 2017, and so on. All of them just end in 2017. Looks good to me. And then current job title. Let's make sure they're all registered nurses. Again, looks good to me. And see, I was worried about something like this, of being something like that in our job title. This says registered nurse -night. If for one reason or another that was in our job title, and if we did not use the wildcard, we wouldn't pick it up. So better safe than to use the wildcard. But there we go. That's using our SQL math with a wildcard and adding an AND, to our where line. Not bad, huh? Okay, here's another one to practice with. Find the average raise, essentially the average salary increase, right here, last salary change amount, for all people whose current salary is more than $200,000 and whose last salary increase action right here was exactly this: public information legislative increase. In other words, there might be some where they got back pay or they got a lawsuit settlement. I'm not concerned about them. I just want to see all people who's gotten a legitimate raise and whose current salary is more than $200,000. So feel free to push pause. I'm going to write the query, see if I get it right, see if I get the same thing as you do, and we'll check it out from there. So I'm going to go up to a new tab, and again, I want to find the average salary increase for everyone making more than $200,000, and I only want the legislative increases. So I'm going to start with select. You always get that first word right 90% of the time, so we're not using an update. And I'm going to say select, let me get the right spelling of my field. What was it? Salary change amount, or last salary change amount. I'm going to put that up in here. So select average last salary change amount. Now I'm going to rename it as last raise, or I'm going to rename it as average raise, I should say. So as average raise. There we go. So it took me a while to think about it, but I'm selecting, I'm averaging the last salary change amount, and I'm renaming it as average raise. I'm only interested in current North Carolina employees. So I'm looking back at our table that we created, or the very first view that we created from NC employees. Now I need two different things from my where field. One, I need where just the increase was because the legislative increase. In other words, it's not back pay. So let's grab that one first. So where last salary increase action, right here, last salary increase action was the legislative pay. So I'm going to find that, and I'm actually going to copy it because I want to make sure I get it right. So right here, pub info hyphen legislative increase. I know this is a bit convoluted, but writing the query is good practice. So I'm going to copy that, last salary increase action, where last salary increase action equals, there we go. So I'm averaging the salary change amount, and I'm renaming that as average raise from current North Carolina employees, where this last salary increase action was a pay increase from the North Carolina legislature. And I only want this for people who already make more than $200,000. So I need to add an end, A and D, current salary was greater than 200,000. Remember, there are no quotes around numbers and no commas in numbers. So does this make sense? Average the raise and rename it as a raise from current North Carolina employees, where the last increase action was a legislative increase and current salary was greater than 200,000. Looks good to me. Let's try running it. And there we go. So the average raise for these folks was $4,900. Not bad. Let's save it. And sorry. Save view. Current NC employees average raise. Just something so we can look back, and if we need to find out for average raise, we'll check it out. Does this all make sense? Essentially, we're just practicing our select from, where, group by, and order bys, but we're adding a little twist with the average salaries. Okay, let's try one more. And this should be an easy one. Find the average raise for all full-time permanent employees for each personnel area or each department type. So full-time employees for each department type, and we want to find the average raise. Average raise. So let's see how we would do that. Select. What field do we want? If we're looking for the average raise for each personnel area where there are full-time permanent employees, what field do we definitely want in our data or in our query? Personnel area, right? This is like using the pivot table and dropping personnel area into rows. So personnel area, and we want to find the average raise. So average, let me see if I can have to find out the name of that field. I'm going to go back to my data and last salary change amount. That's what I need. Last salary change amount. And I'm going to rename that as average raise. And like usual, I'm only interested in current North Carolina employees, so I'm going to refer this query back to our original view from current NC employees, where I'm interested in only full-time permanent. So browse data. Appointment type looks right? Appointment type equals FT permanent. I'm going to copy that just so I spell it right and have the right upper and lower cases. and it's appointment type, where appointment type equals paste. Looks good so far. And because we have a field in our data in our select line, we also need it in our group by line, right? Group by, personnel area, and order by. Let's go like we always do, to descending. So you want to take a second to review this. Select the department and average the last salary change amount. Rename that as average raise. We're only interested in our current North Carolina employees, so that's our from, and we're only interested in full-time permanent employees, and that's in our where. That's our filter. We're grouping by our personnel area, and we're ordering it by to descending. Let's run that. There we go. So the average raise by department looks like the Department of Transportation got the highest average raise at $6,400, followed by State Budget and Management at $4,300, State Auditor $3,300, etc. So you could turn that into a story, or a line to a story if you had a tip, or if you're investigating this, saying the average raise for the Department of Transportation exceeded the average wages for all other departments. Those employees got an average raise of $6,400. And you can scroll down to see the smallest raise, which was the barber exams and opticians at $620. Not bad, right? Let's save this one. Save as view, as current NC employees average raise by department. Current NC employees average raise by department. Okay. So that's the lesson. That's SQL. That's reviewing the select from, where, group by, and order by, but also throwing in some math, averaging and summing. And again, it's all based on importing the data correctly. We need to import it as integers, which means saving it as a number in our CSV file to begin with. Okay, so I want you to do a little practice or a little homework and do these 3 queries. First one, write a query that finds the average age of all current full-time permanent employees for each personnel area. Average age for all current full-time permanent employees for each department. Then the second one, write a query that finds the average age and the average salary for all current employees whose title is like a correctional officer. So average age, average salary for all current employees whose title is like a correctional officer. And the final one, write a query that finds the total salary for all current employees hired in 2016. Write a query that finds the total salary for all current employees hired in 2016.